Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, we will kindly request all of you to rise for the AU anthem. Please rise.
Excellence,
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the speakers of national and regional parliaments, Excellencies, Madam Speaker, or the guest of honor, Her Excellency Senator Gabriela Cuevas Baron, Chairperson, the Committee on Foreign Relations of the Senate, Mexico. We are now going to start our work, and we will do this by transmitting some messages of solidarity by some of the speakers of our regional parliaments at their request during the opening of the session. I would like to invite the speakers, not in chronological order, but by the list of those who have asked the floor. President Jorge Santos, who is the president of the National Parliament of Cabo Verde, I would invite him to come and transmit his message. So you have the floor. Your Excellency, President of the Pan-African Parliament, Dr. Roger Nkodo-Dang, speakers of the regional parliaments here present, speakers of the national parliaments, members of parliament, Honorable Senator Gabriela Cuevas Baron, ladies and gentlemen, it is for me, representing here the National Parliament of Cabo Verde, a great satisfaction, honor, and pride to be given the opportunity to address you during the opening of the work of the 9th Conference of the African Speakers of Parliament. I would like to profoundly thank the President of the Pan-African Parliament, my friend and my companion, Nkodo Dang, for this opportunity, which will for sure be registered in the memory of the Cape Verdean Parliament. This meeting, which is a high-level meeting, takes place every 4 months. In fact, it happened 4 months after the visit, the official visit of Your Excellency to our country, and having been received during a solemn welcome session in our parliament with an enormous participation and great political interest of all the national political parties and of His Excellency, the President of the Cape Verde Republic. I would also like to greet equally all my colleagues, all the speakers of other parliaments, national and regional, and their representatives, which with their presence during this meeting demonstrate their interest and their commitment in the building and the affirmation of the Pan-African Parliament and the African Union. Effectively, parliamentary diplomacy can and should be seen as a complementary element which in fact highlights the foreign relations between our governments of the entire continent and in the promotion of the necessary cooperation, South-South cooperation with the Parliament, by their nature, since they democratically represent their role in political systems, can in fact play a very important role in the structure of the construction of dialogue, strategic consulting on our continent, and they would help their own continental institutions to affirm themselves as spaces of political consultation at world level in the context, as we see today, of threats, of permanent challenges, whatever they are, armed conflicts, insecurity, illicit traffic, the fight against terrorism and climate change, etc. The challenges faced by a landlocked country like Cabo Verde are enormous. Our national institutions have already sent very clear signals and unequivocal signals for the necessity of us to be closer and the integration of our archipelago in the space of the ECOWAS and the African continent. We believe that it is absolutely unavoidable, our process of political and economic integration in the continent. This challenge for Cabo Verde is also a challenge which, in fact, we see to all landlocked countries, whether they be, or all, in fact, island countries, whether they be in the Atlantic or in the Indian Ocean, Cabo Verde, Madagascar, Mauritius, Comores, Seychelles, and others. Small island countries, by their nature and by their geostrategic positioning, can play an extraordinarily important role in the linking of the continent with different political and economic spaces, and as a safeguard in terms of security and fight against illicit traffic. It becomes imperious the definition of a very specific agenda, which would be at the Pan-African level and African Union level, for a better continental integration of the island countries, focusing on the promotion of a very dynamic and continuous development. The sharing and the generosity of countries and their political authorities are principles that, in fact, should direct external relationships. They should guarantee their coherence, their and their strategic importance. In this way, there are interests and different objectives which in fact are at play, should not be antagonistic, but should in fact prevail in a spirit of communion and in fact face the challenges which we are faced with and guarantee a future of stability, prosperity and peace. Our historic and culture symbols constitute a very important link for the construction of the necessary comprehension where fundamental world questions are at issue, having fundamental principles. We've got the rule of law, we've got liberties, the dignity of the human beings, the tolerance, transparency, and good governance. Cape Verde is an island country, but it is in fact a carrier of experiences that can in fact inspire many of our African countries. The conquests which have done so far in terms of what we have realized in terms of the construction of democracy and good governance should be permanently consolidated, and we count on the convergence of all political and civil society actors who live on our islands and also on our diaspora and also with our bilateral and multilateral partners. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, this 9th Conference of the Pan-African Parliaments has for a central theme that we need to harness the demographic dividends through an investment in youth. I certainly congratulate the Pan-African Parliament for the importance, the strategic importance it has given to these questions and to the future of African youth. History and strategic challenges in Africa have already told us that we need to invest in the new generations, which will have as a mission to, in fact, reverse the negative tendency and to build an Africa where there is peace and prosperity with equal opportunities for all, independent of its regional, social, or religious position. The demographic structure of our countries and of the continent in its entirety does in fact indicate that we have an enormous amount of young people who will be needing work until 2050. It seems as if this demographic reality can constitute a great concern for our countries, but it is in fact something we need to accept. It needs to be seen as a window of opportunity for the continent, and we need to depend very strongly on this youth, which is in fact a carrier of our values, of our attitudes, and our potential. We can then harness this demographic dividend to stimulate agricultural and industrial production, to promote more qualified work through our investment in education, through technical professional training, through a society of knowledge, through the technologies, through IT, through the qualification of our institutions, guaranteeing against, in fact, lots of, or going against, in fact, rather negative views. We can, in fact, invest in our youth to give a better equilibrium, social and regional, and our also cohesion, to not forget the contribution of our new generations to the solution of climate change. Dear President and dear colleagues, we need to, in fact, put an end to our complaining, and we need to build a positive vision towards the future of Africa. We need to promote education, the rule of law, meritocracy, dialogue, and tolerance. It is only thus that we can, in the future, affirm and recognize that it will have been valid, in fact, that all our efforts will have, in fact, been towards this, and that we are doing today, that we have, in fact, we need to consent and we need to continue building. Thank you very much for your attention and interest.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we will now give the floor to Namibia for the Namibian speaker for his message. Thank you very much.
Président, vous avez la parole.
You have the floor, Speaker. Namibia has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, the President of the Pan-African Parliament, fellow speakers of various national parliaments, honorable members of the Pan-African Parliament, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely delighted to be here, and I wish to thank you, Mr. President, for your kind invitation that facilitated my return to this important institution. I'm here together with my colleagues from the Namibian Parliament. Both houses of Parliament are represented here. My colleague, the Honorable Margaret Mensah-Williams, the chairperson of the National Council, is equally in attendance. As a former member of the Pan-African Parliament, I hold warm memories of having been part of this continental institution. I will always be interested in the progress that you are making in terms of fulfilling our common dream of achieving prosperity, good governance, and accountability on the African continent. Furthermore, I remain committed to our common desire to calculate into our African citizens and our appreciation, a very strong sense of appreciation of the role of the Pan-African Parliament in enhancing unity on the African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, let me comment briefly on the theme for this 9th Annual Pan-African Parliament Speakers Forum, enhancing the demographic dividends through investment in the youth. The African Development Bank is of the view that harnessing the labor, energy, enterprises of young women and men is critical to drive economic growth and reducing poverty on the African continent. It is critical that we invest in developing Africa's young population. Young men and women are the real treasure of any country. They can be instrumental agents of social economic change and technological innovation. As a recent study by Martin Namasaka of the London School of Economics revealed that by 2035, Africa's labor force will have surpassed that of China and India. For us to achieve a dividend for our continent for this demographic growth, we will need to strategically invest in the development of this human capital. The rising population is a challenge, but also a great resource. If we waste that resource by failing to develop our youthful population, this could also lead to social unrest. Ladies and gentlemen, numerous opportunities exist. The continent's development prospects would greatly be enhanced if we groom our youth population into a well-educated, skilled, innovative, healthy, and vibrant force. Namasak asserts that Africa-led initiatives should focus on employment and entrepreneurship, education and skills development, health and well-being, rights, governance, and youth empowerment. These are solid foundations for achieving sustainable development goals. As the African Union Commission has rightly put it, harnessing the demographic dividend in Africa represents a strategic opportunity to realize the aspirations and goals of Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2063. This roadmap serves as a strong foundation to position countries in Africa towards this important objective. On various parliaments are advised to implement sustainable development goals, including those aspects that relate to the youth. Ladies and gentlemen, the low rate of accession, ratification, and implementation of African Union treaties by member countries is of a particular concern. On issues of accepting, ratifying, and domesticating African Union treaties, I suggest that we establish or think of establishing a specialized unit within the Pan-African Parliament to facilitate the reporting mechanism from our various national parliaments. Indeed, the African Union has become wary of the low rate of accession, ratification, and implementation of African Union treaties by member countries. To date, the African Union has adopted 53 treaties, out of which only 33 have been ratified by member states. As a ministerial committee was set up to look into the matter, and this has turned out to set up a technical team to do an on-the-ground assessment by visiting member countries. Namibia has recently was visited by this particular technical committee. From the discussion we had, we have been able to establish that one of the key challenges was the absence of a national, local, focal point, one-stop shop to deal with African Union treaty ratification and implementation issues. It is our view that this challenge is not unique to Namibia, but is faced by most member countries. We are soon to embark on an exercise of setting up such a national focal point, which will be led by the Ministry of International Relations and Cooperation as the line ministry. Related to this, in the Namibia case, is the legislature needs to have a well-developed mechanism to monitor and evaluate the domestic application of said treaties. The other identified challenge is the absence of standard ratification procedures across the African continent. This, of course, is because of the different constitutional and legal frameworks. Member states, therefore, need to benchmark against standard procedure. These are aspects that the Pan-African Parliament hopefully might wish to revisit for the purpose of harmonization. Ladies and gentlemen, on this note, the Pan-African Parliament might wish to design a special platform through which this exercise could be undertaken, including a clearly defined information sharing mechanism. What is the way forward? I feel that the best way to overcome these particular challenges is, one, first, the African Union and Pan-African Parliament should come up with a clearly defined, acceptable, standardized methodology of how African Union treaties should be acceded to, ratified, and implemented by member countries. A booklet or manual guidelines could be produced and shared. Obviously, this will take a while, but it's a worthwhile exercise. Secondly, and very importantly, ladies and gentlemen, is the issue of weighing the impact of legislation and policy passed in our various national parliaments, and also at the continental level. Monitoring and evaluation is absolutely essential. This is a need to undertake a special assessment to establish the financial cost for operationalizing any piece of legislation and policy before it is enacted, and equally important, auditing its societal impact after enactment. African Union Treaty should also be subjected to this particular exercise. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, speakers of African National Assemblies, I would like to present the excuses of the Speaker of the Democratic Republic of Congo Assembly and also former Speaker of the Francophone Parliament, but unfortunately had other commitments and couldn't, in fact, be here. So he would like to present his excuses, and with all his heart, he is with us, and he is with all our resolutions that are going to be taken here. I would like now to invite the Speaker of the Sudanese Assembly. Please, you have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah. Honorable President Roger Ndoko-Dang, President of the Pan-African Parliament, honorable speakers of the African Parliaments, honorable members of the Pan-African Parliament, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. First of all, I'd like to extend my warm thanks and appreciation to you, Honorable President, and the honorable members of the Pan-African Parliament, for the invitation extended to me to be with you today, wishing to the Pan-African Parliament more success in discharging its mission in favor of an African continent where the spirit and the values of democracy, liberty, respect for human rights prevail. Honorable President, members of the Parliament, Sudan has, since its independence, has always stood by the African causes and has always championed them on the international arena, and has contributed to a large extent to the championing of the causes of African liberation from colonialism. And the inception of the Pan-African Parliament has led to the consolidation of the independence of our continent. This Pan-African Parliament, that is the family house of the African peoples, in which they efficiently contribute to make decisions in favor of all the African peoples. Sudan has been one of the first founders of this giant parliament and has been honored to host a great number of Pan-African Parliament meetings in order to ensure its success and the success of its proceedings. The draft revised protocol has been lent great interest by the Sudanese Parliament, as well as all the the whole Sudanese administration. And a committee has been set up in this respect in order to improve the text and to bring the necessary amendments to it. Honorable President, honorable members, Sudan will never forget the support and the assistance provided by the Honorable President of the Pan-African Parliament and the members of the Parliament during the Sharm el-Sheikh session, where all the members have firmly stood against the unilateral American economic sanctions imposed on my countries. They condemn very strongly such sanctions and the impact of such sanctions on the life of our people, and that are conflicting with the humanitarian international law, and asked the American administration to lift them immediately. We highly appreciate the declaration, your declaration, where you condemn these measures. You've also set up a committee headed by the President of the Pan-African Parliament who visited the United States of America, where they championed the causes of Africa, including my countries. You went there in order to prove that Africa is one with one voice. You also insisted on the adverse effects of such sanctions on the life of our people and the Sudanese economy. Sudan highly appreciates this position that is a brotherly position and that is harmonious with the objectives that underpinned the creation of our African institution, the African Union, the Pan-African Parliament, that strive to establish the principle of one Africa, one voice, has contributed to the partial lifting of the unilateral sanctions against Sudan. On the other hand, the African states have also taken a very lofty position while condemning the ICC position that is one of the colonialism tools against the African continent. Honorable President, honorable members, our country is moving forward toward multilateral democracy, taking into account all the sectors of our society. The dialogue has come to the national dialogue has come to its close, which led to the ceasefire and led to the entering of humanitarian aid and assistance to all sections of our country. We've also added the number of seats in our national parliament by 55 members, as well as the number of wilayas by 19 members. Our parliament, with its new composition, is now composed by more than 60 political parties and movements and political groupings. This is a political change, a very positive political change, an unprecedented one. And the government of national concord is accepted by all sections of our society and our political parties. Sudan also has been assisting at the international arena, especially when in relation to the illegal migration and the human trafficking and money laundering and counterterrorism. And I would like also to highlight the role of my country as part of IGAD, in terms of supporting South Sudan and supporting its integrity. Honorable President, the future of our youth and the development issues, as well as the demographic issues, are interdependent issues that require an understanding and measures and planning. And we need to look deeply into the future of our generations and how they are going to live and how we preserve our environment. All these issues need deep reflection. This House is precisely doing the job. We, therefore, stand by you in your endeavors. We need to open all these files to thoroughly think of the demographic dividend. How would be the role of our youth in the future? How are we really going to achieve sustainable development when we think of the demographic increase in our countries? Is our youth ready to shoulder the responsibilities? Are our elders ready to open new horizons for our youth? All these issues and questions are important ones. And this meeting today in Africa is an important one, which will be dealing with very extremely important matters. We need really to have thorough and deep reflections on all these extremely important issues. To conclude, I would like to say that as part of the challenges that we are facing, the African Common Action is imperative. It is an action in which all the national parliaments will play a central role, and we are confident that the Pan-African Parliament is able to lead to success and will meet the expectations of the African peoples. I thank you very much for your listening. Thank you.
Shukran. Now I want to give the floor to Honorable Speaker from Mozambique, Honorable Veronica Macamo.
Sua Excelência.
Your Excellency, President of the Pan-African Parliament, our very distinguished and respected friend, Your Excellencies, Speakers of African Parliaments, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. I do thank you very much, Mr. President, for giving me the opportunity to address this assembly and also to be able to greet and to welcome all the other speakers, and also to welcome here the theme of the harnessing of the demographic dividend through the investment in youth. On the African continent, the youth is in fact the majority of the population, and it constitutes its in fact greatest asset. However, the OIT, in fact, the report from the OIT from 2013 does show very negative results in terms of the unemployment rates, and saying that both in North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, youth are very much affected by unemployment, which makes it very difficult, in fact, for the youth to be able to participate in the development of our countries and in any kind of progress. I would like to congratulate the Parliament for the choice of this theme. When we look at youth, we look at the greatest treasure that we have. We look at youth with hope. But we certainly have to change our attitude, and we need to make sure that this youth can, in fact, use its experience, its creativity, its innovation to actually be able to develop our countries. Excellencies, the African Union very much within the framework of the poverty. In fact, 2063 agenda has been adopted in order to put an end to the poverty. Amongst other objectives, there are aspirations towards prosperity and well-being, and it has in mind, in fact, the harnessing of the potential offered by women and youth. Today, all our efforts towards the development of our countries, we will have, in fact, economic benefits if we do, in fact, use all our active population, and in particular our youth, since they constitute the majority. The youth, which, if they are properly trained, if they have health, if they have housing, if they have equal opportunities for young women and young men, if we do protect also the environment, and if we go towards stable and functional economic stability, they will certainly contribute to transform our societies into, in fact, great development, so that they go towards the well-being of our populations. This meeting, in fact, has the merit of uniting here the speakers of all the different parliaments. These are the leaders, in fact, of the people's houses. And this is so that we can think about how best use this potential and how to motivate, how to mobilize our youth, so that, in fact, it can contribute in a decisive manner towards the development of our countries. In this sense, for the African continent to be able to benefit from this potential, I think that, in my modest opinion, amongst other actions, I think we should do the following. The participation of youth in the decision-making process, particularly so that the interests of youth will be reflected as a priority in the agendas of different governments. Who can best interpret, in fact, what the youth needs? In fact, youth itself. If they have, in fact, the power of decision-making, they will be able to say what are their aspirations. The programs of training, whether it is schools or universities, or whether they need to, in fact, harness the spirit of entrepreneurship and also go towards sustainable jobs. The creation of these jobs, in fact, will permit the development of youth. There should be programs, in fact, where the youth would be able to be part of what is there already, and through its intelligence actually be able to contribute towards the development of the well-being. Bigger investment in the rural areas, and particularly in agriculture, to be able again to harness also the possibilities, and also to reduce the amount of youth who are migrating to the cities. We should have programs, in fact, to put an end to early marriage, which in fact damage the involvement of young girls in society and makes us far more vulnerable to poverty. We need to say, as Africans, we would like poverty not to have the face of a woman. But for this, in fact, not to happen, we need to fight. We need to fight for women and also for young women. Excellencies, Mozambique would like to respond to the challenges faced by youth and has approved the following instruments. There is a youth policy, there's a creation of youth ministry and sport ministry, there's been a creation of a parliamentary office for youth, there are programs, in fact, towards the development of youth, and in fact, where recently qualified young people are in fact involved in programs of work. We've got programs of information for sexual and reproductive health, and also for the fight against HIV/AIDS and drugs. But despite all the efforts undertaken by our governments, our countries continue to face huge challenge. The reduction of unemployment, the reductions, of course, of HIV rates, the reductions, of course, in terms of earnings, in terms of housing, in terms of we need to put an end still to early marriages and also to early pregnancies. To end, Mr. President, I would like to thank you for the honor and the privilege you have given us to be able to take the floor here. And we would like to say that we reiterate our commitment so that together we can make of our countries and we can make our states into privileged, into spaces which will, in fact, favor youth and to undertake concrete actions which will absolutely ensure its implementation. Excellencies, I am absolutely sure that together, that if we speak with the same voice, if we exchange experiences, that we will in fact get to where we want to go, and we will certainly reach the fundamental objective to absolutely remove Africa from poverty and harness all its potential, to use all its human resources, and particularly harness youth. And together we'll be able to do, together we will win. And I would like to really once more to give you my sincere thanks.
Shukran.
Obrigado, Senhor Presidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Mesdames,
Dear colleagues, excellencies, I now would like to invite our guest of honor, Madame Gabriela. All the solidarity messages will be delivered from 2:30 p.m. Madame Gabriela, the floor is yours.
Honorable President of the Pan-African Parliament, Mr. Roger Kodo Dang, honorable speakers of the African Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Mexico, its legislative power and its government, I thank the Pan-African Parliament for this great opportunity to address such a distinguished audience. Thank you all for your kind generosity. This is the first time that a Mexican national addresses the annual Conference of Speakers of African Parliaments. With such honor, there is only one way to express gratitude: the responsibility of building a solid friendship between us and between, of course, our people. Mexico and Africa share a past, a present, and a future. We have more similarities that we can imagine. I will even dare to say that Latin America and the Caribbean has more in common with Africa that can be seen at first sight. Our peoples have suffered from colonial domination and from hard independence struggles. We became prey of cruel ambitions to profit from our national resources. We still face great inequality in the distribution of income, and we fight hunger, poverty, and injustice. We suffer from the consequences of climate change. We promote great changes to achieve gender equality and inclusion of youth. We are aware of the great importance for our countries and for our people of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We share a common future, and we share common causes. My name is Gabriela Cuevas. 23 years ago, I decided to engage in politics. I joined my political party. It is called National Action Party. I was 15 years old by the time, and I was, and I still am, convinced that action is needed to transform a reality that is hurtful at times and dashes the dreams of millions of people because of the unfairness of the world we live in. For 17 years, I have had the privilege to be both a federal and a local representative in the 5 different mandates. And I govern the most important part of Mexico City, where more than 500,000 persons are living. I'm currently the president of the Foreign Affairs Commission in the Mexican Senate. And I am also very proud to say that I'm the secretary of the African Committee we have in Mexico. I'm also the chair of the Mexican delegation at the Interparliamentarian Union, the IPU. The world is facing very complex times, Fundamental values such as democracy and human rights, values that seem taken for granted, now are being challenged by loud voices. Multilateralism that has proved time and again that dialogue, consensus, and negotiation yield good results is being challenged today by powerful actors that privilege imposition over agreement. We parliamentarians have to make a choice. We can be spectators of what is happening in our planet, or we can engage in the promotion of the more noble aspirations of humankind. I have made my choice. My country, Mexico, is convinced of the importance of respecting and defending democracy and human rights. Mexico is a country open to the world, to free trade. I come from a country that defends multilateral institutions and agreements, a country that has 12 million people living beyond its borders. In Mexico, we know how much families and communities suffer when xenophobic voices are raised to build walls instead of bridges. My decision to present this candidacy to be the president of IPU is an invitation to work together to defend democracy, human rights, multilateralism, its agreements and institutions. In October, the Interparliamentarian Union, the IPU, will elect its new president for the period between 2017 and 2020. Following the principle of geographical rotation, Latin America and the Caribbean should lead our organization during that period. The IPU was created 128 years ago, and the vast majority of the world's parliaments are actively involved in it. The IPU is the most important multilateral parliamentary organization and therefore has immense potential and relevance, particularly if we consider the state of international affairs today. This is the first time that Mexico submits a candidacy for the presidency of the IPU. This candidacy is supported by the Chamber of Deputies, the Senate, and the government of the Republic. By doing so, we reaffirm that the world needs to consolidate an inclusive multilateralism that unifies all the voices that want peace in our world. I decided to take this path to the presidency of IPU, knowing that the goal is ambitious, that it will require hard work, time, and dedication. But I am convinced and excited about how much we parliamentarians can achieve from IPU. I want a presidency that remains close to the parliamentarians and national and regional legislative powers. Those of us who have a vocation in politics, we know that communication is indispensable for all that reason, and I have assumed two commitments. The first one is to build an IPU where dialogue does produce results, and the other one is to achieve true friendship between the parliamentarians of the world. My language is Spanish. I learned English, and my next challenge is to learn French. Le premier engagement est très personnel, et j'ai
The first commitment I had was, some weeks ago during the Francophonie meeting. The election of IPU, while recognizing the excellent work of the interpreters, I would like be in direct touch with the members of the organization.
In addition to this, I know how important are languages in our organization. And let me say that I can't believe when I received the report about how we should present a candidacy for the IPU, and one of the main requests was to know French or English. None of the other languages matter if you want to be candidate for this organization. And that's not democratic, and that is not fair. And we can't build an organization based on exclusion. So one of my second commitment, the first one I already tried to explain that in French, my second commitment is to do my best, and I hope to have your support to organize this, is to include Spanish, Portuguese, and Arab as official languages of the IPU. Also, IPU has an important plan, and a strategic plan that will work until 2020. It's important to work in the working areas. One, the first one, an IPU for parliamentarians. If we don't focus on the persons, it's going to be impossible to be better parliamentarians. So we need to really address what is happening in the world. The world is changing, but we aren't. We need to improve our own capacities. We need more education. We need seminars. We need workshops. We need to learn more about international law. We need also to improve our tools for communication, social media. We need to be more active if we want to remain relevant for our constituencies. Also, we need to create spaces, and I underline this, to be friends. There are no spaces to communicate each other, to know each other, to be really making a good network that we can use in case we need some help in our own countries. And third, we need to use technology in order to help us in our responsibilities. Second, we need a closer IPU to the national parliaments. Many of us go to the assemblies, participate, we're very active. I can see here very important faces and names. But we need also to, if we're going all around the world to an IPU assembly, we need to go back to our homes and cities and parliaments with an important mandate. And it is to implement what is happening in IPU, but also to remember that all the important agreements that our countries are signing at the multilateral level, for example, the Paris Agreement about climate change, we can have the opportunity to know better how to implement that in the national legislation. We can have also the opportunity to define different mechanisms to make a good follow-up. There's a lot of opportunities if we link in a better way IPU with the national parliaments. The third and last one of these lines, it's to create a relevant IPU in the United Nations system. IPU has an observer status at the UN, but it's important not only to remain seeing what is happening, we need to take action. And to take action and to become more relevant to UN, we can make two simple changes with very relevant and important consequences. The first one is to synchronize the calendar of the IPU with the UN. We need, for example, to have an important space and a meeting during the general debates in the General Assembly of UN. In that way, we're going to be close to the important actors at the international level, heads of state, presidents, and the General Secretary of UN. Many of you probably know that the General Secretary used to be a parliamentarian and used to be a member of IPU. This is a great opportunity that we can use for our beloved organization. And second, we need also to improve our thematic agenda in order to be prepared for the challenges that UN and having a better interaction is going to demand from us. For example, UN is going to address for the next 2 years these issues about migration and refugees. What is IPU going to say about that? Which is going to be the position of the parliamentarians around the world? We need to address it. We need to be prepared. We need a consensus so we can have a real agreement from IPU to UN. I want to be the second president in all the history of IPU. In 128 years of this organization, only one lady used to be president. She was from India. I want to be the second one. But this distinction carries a great responsibility. It is surprising that this very long organization had only one woman. So it's imperative that we promote an agenda of inclusion and gender equality in our organization and in our parliament. I know that African countries support this agenda. African parliaments have been making a real change in their countries. And of course, I have to bring this agenda to the IPU and give full support to the Forum of Parliamentarian Women, who is making outstanding efforts. In this context, and I only have 2 minutes, so I must be really fast, I would like to use this time to make my commitments with Africa, with the African parliaments, and of course with the Pan-African Parliament. First of all, I want to be here, and I want to be active in this continent. I know that sometimes it's difficult to believe in politicians, but in this case, all of us are politicians. So I want to be here, and I want to be close, and I want to share and push for our agenda. Of course, I would like to, and maybe, I'm not sure if the president is going to allow me, but in the next capacity I want to be invited here as the next president of IPU. Also, I would like to have a meeting with the African group in each one of the assemblies of IPU. I want to have a close communication. I want to have the opportunity to work together. And trying to be very humble, but this is one of the requests I want to make. I want to ask for your support, but not only with your vote in St. Petersburg. I want your support for the 3 years we are going to have with a lot of work, with a lot of dedication. For 3 years, we are going to decide to make a higher voice, and of course to speak up to defend multilateralism, to defend parliamentarians, and to use parliamentarian diplomacy to build a world full of love and full of peace. Thank you very much for this invitation.
Thank you very much, Madame. Mesdames, Messieurs les
Honorable speakers of national parliaments, excellencies, ambassadors, high commissioners, representatives of international organizations to South Africa, Honorable Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament, Honorable chairpersons of permanent committees and permanent caucuses of the Pan-African Parliament, Madam Commissioner of Human Resources of the AUC, honorable members of the Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, clerks of the national parliaments, Dr. Shitumi Prilar, Ambassador of Food Security, distinguished guests, dear colleagues. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the year 2017 was fatal for our continent. Africa has lost several of its children, sons and daughters. Let me invite you, first of all, to observe a minute of silence to the passing away of the former president of Botswana, who honored us with his presence.
Merci.
Thank you. Excellencies, speakers of the assemblies and senates of Africa, it wouldn't be remiss of me not to welcome you here in your parliament. Each year, you sacrifice to your duties and schedules to come here and meet your colleagues parliamentarians here. I would like to thank you for this and commend you for the efforts that you constantly make to send the delegations of African Parliament here to work for the interest of our continent. These are laudable and remarkable efforts, despite the serious economic crisis that is prevailing in our countries, as well as the security crisis that does not enable our economies to move forward. I'd like to thank Senator Gabriela Guevara, who crossed the oceans to come and meet us here, which is an evidence, a testimony of the respect that Madame Gabriela shows to you and to the African continent. Madame, thank you very much for your message. We've listened this morning messages from honorable members, and this will continue in the afternoon. I'd like to thank you for the multifaceted efforts made to make sure that the Pan-African Parliament becomes a legislative organ with full-fledged powers. The Pan-African Parliament hosts each year the sittings of the permanent committees in August, and two conferences, one of the Secretary Generals of Africa and the other one, our principals. It is an occasion to exchange on the role that can be played by our parliament through decisions made by the African Union. This year, the Pan-African Parliament suggested to deepen the reflection on the theme adopted by the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the African Union during the 28th Summit Assembly held in Addis Ababa, that is, harnessing the demographic dividend by investing in the youth. The choice of this theme by the African leaders is a significant one. It marks the end of the youth decade 2009-2018 of the Union, and it is part of the Agenda 2063 of the African Union, as well as the SDGs of the United Nations. The Pan-African Parliament, as a legislative organ with a consultative advisory powers, has as its main missions in its rules of procedure, as stated in its rules of procedures, to implement the objectives and programs and to supervise their implementation by the organs of the Union through prior consultation with you, national and regional assemblies or parliaments, in accordance with Article 77 of the Rules of Procedure. For better coordination, we favor teamwork, and this is a custom. It has become a custom for us that the Conference of Speakers of Parliament be preceded by the annual meeting of the associations of Secretary Generals. Excellencies, speakers, honorable speakers of the Parliament, excellent honorable Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament, honorable members, we have 48 hours during which we will be consulting and discussing in order to craft the reference frameworks that will be proposed to our institutions, for them to have tools and mechanisms that would facilitate taking the ownership and the domestication of this theme that is the objective of this meeting. 3 lines of reflection will be conducted here. First, deep discussions on the challenges and opportunities of the theme chosen, and then the floor will be given to the youth of our continent that are represented here by the Youth Caucus of the Pan-African Parliament. And this will be an opportunity for them as well to let us know what are their expectations and the means to achieve these objectives and their own contribution, as well as the contributions of the national and regional parliaments, as they are the ones that vote the finance acts and bills in our countries. Then Now, I would like to underscore that the Conference of Speakers of Parliament adopt themes according to the topical concerns or current concerns, and it remains, it makes sure to achieve more results. Therefore, the last line of our reflection, it will be devoted to the state of play of the implementation of the recommendations of the 8th Conference of the Speakers of the Parliament held on August 2017 on the theme of the adoption to the ratification of the African Union treaties, including the new protocol, Malabo Protocol relating to the Pan-African Parliament. Advantages for Africa. The conference will be concluded by recommendations as well as the resolutions of the General Secretaries that was held in August 2017. I would wish you fruitful deliberations, and I thank you very much, and I declare open the Conference of Speakers of the Parliament and Senate of Africa. I thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before adjourning, I'd like to suggest that we move on to the election of the Bureau of the Conference. This will make us save some time.
Are there any candidates in the chamber? I would suggest to you the candidature of Madame Rebecca, Speaker of the National Assembly of Uganda, as chairperson of the conference. It is so decided. I would like to suggest the candidacy to the position of Vice President of the Speaker of the National Assembly of Rwanda, knowing that South Africa has celebrated yesterday Women's Day, and this celebration continues today. It is so decided. For the post of Vice President, I would like to suggest the candidature of the Speaker of Sierra Leone, knowing that he is a dean. Any objection? It is so decided. For the position of rapporteur, I would like to suggest the candidacy of the Speaker of the National Assembly of Gabon, and also the Speaker of the People's National Assembly of Algeria. It is so decided. Dear colleagues, we have concluded the agenda. We adjourn the session for a few minutes. Thank you.
Let's have a photo session. If we go up the door to our right, we'll have a group photograph. Thank you.